Hey guys, I'm back here on the fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania for another Irish-American history report for Division 32. I've been here a few times, as you know, but this area is just so rich in not only American history but Irish history that I encourage you all to take the trip and come out here. I say that all the time, but I really do encourage you to do that and just experience some of this history for yourself. In the past, when I've been here, we've talked about the heroics and the exploits of the Irish Brigade. And we actually have, over my shoulder here, I did not arrange this, the reenactors of the Irish Brigade. And they're here having an event. But most Irishmen who served in the American Civil War did not serve in an Irish Brigade. They did not serve in a specially designated ethnic unit. They served the way that most Americans served. They joined up with people from their hometown, from their neighborhood, from people in the same area of the city that they had immigrated to. That is how most Irishmen served. And I want to talk to you today about one example of this, of an Irishman who served with his fellow Pennsylvanians, with his fellow Pittsburghers, in a non-Irish designated unit, but he was very, very much an Irishman. His name was Charles McKenna. Whether he was related to any of the McKennas of AOH Division 32, I do not know. And I don't know if he would admit knowing any of those guys either. In any event, Charles McKenna was born in Pittsburgh in the 1840s. His grandfather had immigrated from County Tyrone, and Charles's father died when he was about 1 year old. His mother ran a boarding house on Penn Avenue in Pittsburgh, and he grew up in very dire circumstances. His mother was just barely making it through running this boarding house. Everyone in the boarding house was either Irish or Irish American, and that's how the family subsisted. He got an internship working as a printer, and he actually had a great talent for artwork. And we actually have some of his drawings from the American Civil War, and that's why we know how camp life was in the American Civil War, because of some of Charles McKenna's drawings. But in 1862, like many of his neighbors and friends, he turned 18 and he joined the United States Army with the 155th Pennsylvania Regiment. This was a regiment that was raised in Pittsburgh, and it consisted of Pittsburghers. And that's how Charles McKenna served, much like how so many Irishmen served in the American Civil War, signing up with their neighbors, with their friends, people from their own parish, wherever they settled. The 155th Pennsylvania arrived here on the field at Gettysburg halfway through the second day, July 2nd, 1863, of the Battle of Gettysburg. Before, we've talked about the battle up at Little Round Top, and I talked about a good cavalryman, Colonel O'Rourke, who was a hero and fell defending Little Round Top from a Confederate attack. The 155th Pennsylvania Volunteers, with Charles McKenna, arrived to defend Little Round Top around that same time. If you've seen the film Gettysburg, you know all about the battle for Little Round Top. Jeff Daniels playing Joshua Chamberlain, and that's a huge portion of that film is showing the battle for the control of the left flank of the Union line at Gettysburg. But the 155th Pennsylvania also played a decisive role on the other side of the hill. Confederates, Texans came up the hill. The 155th Pennsylvania was armed with muskets, so they had to hold their fire because they didn't have the more advanced rifles. And the Texans actually thought they'd find a hole in the northern United States Army line until they hit the force of the Pittsburghers standing there with their muskets. And that Pittsburgh unit was able to push the Confederates down on the right side of Little Round Top. If you come and visit the field, you can go and see all the different monuments, and there's a 155th Pennsylvania monument right up there on Little Round Top. I encourage you to check it out, but it marks that spot where the Pittsburghers pushed back that Confederate attack and held the line and held this anchor so that the United States Northern Union Army line could remain intact and win the Battle of Gettysburg the next day on that third day. So Charles McKenna, grandson of a Tyrone man, was one of those Pittsburghers who stopped the Confederate attack on the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. After the war, Charles McKenna abandoned his art career and actually took an apprenticeship as an attorney, as a lawyer. And he trained in the law, and eventually he became a judge. First, he became a judge, one of the first United States district judges in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico after the Spanish-American War, and eventually becoming one of the first judges on the Allegheny Court of Common Pleas. So he had a very distinguished career. In fact, so much that he was a prominent member of Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania society that he was chosen to be on the commission for the building of the biggest monument on the field here at Gettysburg, which is the monument, naturally enough, to the state of Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania volunteers who served here on the field of Gettysburg. So Charles McKenna was on that commission that helped design this beautiful monument here, which again is the largest one on the field. And his story really kind of reflects a little bit of that Irish-American immigrant experience. Being born into poverty, being born into a ethnic community that was very tight, very cohesive, but very deprived, and struggling to make ends meet and trying to find a trade, and then serving in the United States military, serving the United States Army with distinction, and then using that to climb the ranks and study law, become a professional, and then eventually become a prominent member of the judiciary and respected around the state and respected around the country. And his experience, although it's unique and it's personal to him, really does reflect that trajectory that you see throughout the 19th century. So just wanted to share that little story about Charles McKenna, the grandson of a Tyrone immigrant who fought here on the fields of Gettysburg, and then after the war rose to become one of the prominent men in Western Pennsylvania. So thanks for your attention. I think that I'm going to go and talk to some of these Irish Brigade reenactors and see what they have to say before heading over to Gary Owen Pub for a pint. So that's your Irish American History Report, and I'll see you guys later. Slán.